So we'll start off with introductions. I'm Michelle Brown, for those of you who don't know me. My co-host is Amber. I'll let her sort of share a little bit of background. She and I are both certified coaches. I sort of specialize in executive and leadership and career coaching, and she specializes in life coaching, a lot around wellness and living a balanced life. And with this onslaught of business unusual, we put our heads together and decided that we wanted to begin to provide some group coaching and an informal chat where people can come to our Wednesday weekly webinars to gain information and insight, to share best practices, to just really create community as we are having to work remotely and practice social distancing. So we welcome you. And Amber, I'm going to turn it over to you to do a little bit of intros before I get into today's program.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Amber. For those of you who I don't know, I'm happy to meet you, even if it's digitally, because this is going to be the way of life for the next few weeks or months. We don't know, which is, as Michelle said, a part of why we've done this. We really find that when people have the tools to get through things, to be more resilient, when there's more knowledge around things and there's not as much uncertainty, then we're a lot less stressed and we're a lot happier and we're a lot more able to be intentional about how we use this time. So that is why we're here, for a little bit of socializing, hopefully a couple of laughs, a lot of knowledge and some coaching, and to give you some comfort through our resources and advice. So we're really happy to speak with Dr. Ruchi Kaul today. She is going to give us just a lot of clarity around what's going on right now. And so I'll kick off to Ruchi to just introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Ruchi Kaul. I'm a family medicine doctor. I have a practice in Ridgewood. I have been sort of, slammed over the head, as has everyone else, with all the information going on regarding the pandemic and what we can do. And I'm learning every day about the virus itself and how to handle it, as well as my own mind and thoughts and how to handle that around what's going on, and my family and all that fun stuff. I'm in a child's bedroom with some bunk beds back here because that's kind of the way of life as we know it right now. But so far, kids are doing well, we're doing well, and everybody's healthy and safe, and that's really the most important thing for everyone.
Absolutely. So Ruchi, before we really give you the mic and let you do your thing, I just want to sort of share with everyone sort of the flow and format. This is really intended to be interactive and participatory. I see many of you have muted, which is fine. Feel free to post any questions that you may have in the chat throughout Ruchi's talk. I'm sure that, she'll pause because there may be some specific questions that we have that are relevant to the things that she's talking about, because she's a wealth of knowledge. So, feel free to either post your questions in the chat room, and either Amber and I will keep monitoring those questions to make sure that Ruchi's aware of them. But I'm sure that at the end, we'll leave enough time for, plenty of Q&A. So with that, we'll let you kick it off, Ruchi. Let me just provide just a little bit of context. So there's a lot of information out there, and the three of us had a conference call earlier this week. And, what we have asked Ruchi to do, because there's so much information and, we only have about an hour or less, obviously, to cover. It's, what's working, what's out there, what should we do, for ourselves to try to prevent ourselves? What happens if you have a loved one that has been susceptible to it? Just a host of questions. She's going to walk through most of them. And again, whatever questions you may have, feel free to either post them or raise your hand. Okay, take it away, Ruchi.
All right, so I know one of the things that we've talked about is sort of like where we are now and where we're heading. So we are really getting to that peak in New Jersey and New York. And, part of what controls that peak, as we all know, is the more that we stay apart from each other, the less the virus can catch us, right? Like sort of like a game of tag. It can't catch you if you don't come close. So what we are hoping is that this week and next week is somewhere in here is the peak. And then after that, we're going to start to see the cases go down, cases per day. I know you guys all can get information on the internet and all that fun stuff. I just looked really quickly. New Jersey, as of yesterday, was up to 18,696 cases, with 5,310 new cases just on Monday. So it really kind of points to the gravity of the situation. And when people are like, do we really need to do this? Yes, we really need to do this. And the person who you are saving the most by doing this is you. Yes, there is the social aspect to it, that we're saving our communities, and that's definitely true. But we are seeing people in this country, younger people, getting sicker now. Is that because they were at the beach, or they were in some parade, or they happened to be at JFK getting sent back from whatever vacation or spring break they were on? Or is that just the way that it was going to play out in their body? We don't know enough about that yet right now. And so what we do know is that the less possibility you have to be in contact with the virus or anybody with the virus, the safer you are. We know that when people are asymptomatic, so before they have symptoms, but after they've been exposed, there is a small amount of viral shedding. What does that mean? That means that before you even know that you get the virus, you can also transmit it to somebody else. That being said, there's a lot more shedding when you're symptomatic. So you don't have to be like, well, I already exposed all these people because I was around them when I didn't have symptoms. It's still totally useful to quarantine once you do have symptoms, or once somebody else does have symptoms, to stay away from them until their symptoms are gone. And that will just ensure that it's not passed on. We do know that so far, what we know is 5 to 10% of household contacts can get the disease if they quarantine well. So that's way better than half and half or whatever. Obviously, if you hang out together, you're much more likely to get it. But if you quarantine, it's 5 to 10% of household contacts pass it on.
Ruchi, if I may jump in just to ask you a question based on what you just said, what does that mean to quarantine well?
What does that mean to quarantine?
We should be taking to quarantine? Yeah.
Yeah. So being in a different room, and having a separate bathroom. So the person who is ill should have their own bathroom in their own room, and they should stay in those spaces and not come out of those spaces. Like sort of passing through the house to take a walk outside, not super helpful, but also they're probably tired enough that they don't really want to do that. Whoever is well can deliver food to, right outside the door. There's Lysol and Clorox are our best friends nowadays, right? So wiping down everything. The person who is sick can wear a mask in the house. I know a lot of people are doing cloth masks or whatever, and those are not super effective. I mean, they're better than nothing, but you're still able to sort of transmit virus through that cloth mask. So one of the problems we're having is that there aren't enough masks, there aren't enough things. But if you have something, a surgical mask, an N95, whatever, you want that to be on the sick person. You want that to be on the person who is breathing out virus, so that they're not infecting other people.
I have a question, Ruchi.
Yeah.
So, they've been telling us to practice social distancing, right? And, we're able to kind of go out to the supermarkets, etc. But is that, you also made reference to sheltering in place. So what should we be conscious of doing to keep ourselves sort of safe and at the same time look to try to flatten this curve?
Okay, so there's all these different words right now, right, for staying home. And, one is just doctor saying stay home, but there's, you know, the original, what if we did nothing? You guys have seen all those graphs. There's a graph that's like, if we did nothing, it would be like this. And then if we social distance, it'll be like that, right? And in New Jersey, we're kind of past the point of social distancing, which is just like, do your thing, but stay 6 feet away from everybody. With social distancing, the goal really was, we weren't going to have any fewer sick people. 70% of the population was going to get infected without social distancing, and 70% of the population was going to get infected with social distancing, right? But what we saw was, you know, in Wuhan style lockdown, once they locked everybody down, that virus didn't go places. Now, there were lots of aspects to that. One is no one's going anywhere except for, you know, very, very important life-saving activities like grocery shopping, whatever. And that the goal in that lockdown is that there's less than 3% of the population who gets the virus. Less than 3 versus 70, which is huge, right? What does that mean? That means later when we open up, those people will still be susceptible. But in terms of containing the outbreak, if we contain it for long enough, and then all the people who have virus get over it, or whatever their course is going to be, and then but those people are all contained in one place, and then the rest of us can't spread it because we don't have it. When we come back, it will be, you know, you'll get it from people coming from other countries and that sort of thing, and some of those other measures will be in place for longer. So what they found was sheltering in place. So the Bay Area and San Francisco, they did sheltering in place like a week before we did, right? And their cases were much lower, and they didn't have that big spike that we're coming up on. And so it's something like under 20% of people or less will get infected if we shelter in place, which means you don't leave your house unless it's like a life-saving thing. Not like I feel like going for a drive, but like I need food because we have to eat. Like that would be a life-saving event for which you need to go outside, and minimizing those events are really what's protecting you from the outside.
So Ruchi, I've heard quite a few people say that getting outside to get fresh air and getting sun is really healthy for us. And so if you're saying what you're saying about the sheltering in place, then how do we handle that? How do we balance actually getting outside and getting a little fresh air, especially if you're like me and you've got 2 kids who just cannot always be contained to the household?
Right. So what you're trying to avoid is being around a lot of people, right? So especially in suburban New Jersey, hopefully everybody has, you know, even like our little postage stamp size backyard or front yard. And what we have been doing is going out into the yard. Actually, right before this call, I was out in the yard with the kids for about half an hour. In the sunlight, we know that the sunlight, the UV part of the sunlight actually kills virus. And so, you know, the way that we worry about virus being on surfaces in the house and it lasting for 72 hours on plastic and however many hours on wood and however many hours on metal, we know that the UV light kills the virus. So surfaces outside are kind of regularly being cleansed. They don't have lingering virus. But if everybody stays even in their own yards, or you go for a walk around the block or whatever, and you're not like hanging out with 15 other people, like in Brooklyn, I have a classmate from high school who was saying that people are going for walks and they're kind of brushing by each other, or they're not giving each other the space, but really having the space to go around, or finding a place where there's fewer people. Because that's part of the safety. Yes, be outside, but not, you know, in a place where there's lots of people. So there's people walking up and down the block in downtown Ridgewood. That sort of defeats the purpose. Like I had gone into town in Ridgewood, and there was an entire family that had gone to pick up their food at a restaurant, including a child. Like one person should leave the house when you need to leave the house. And when I say leave the house, like on a trip, on a mission, it should be a mission. When you're going out, you're on a mission to do something, to get something. You're not dawdling. You're not like hanging out, chit-chatting. You're going out, getting your thing, and coming back. Can you talk to your neighbors across the street? Absolutely. From your side of the street, right? So that sort of a thing.
So we've got some questions being posted. One came in from Verna. She asks, once someone has the virus, what's the average time spent with it until they recover?
So typically, so what we know is that once you're exposed to the virus, it takes between 2 and 14 days to develop symptoms. Now, the majority of those people get symptoms between 2 and 5 days. So after 5 days, 97% of people who are going to have symptoms have the symptoms. People are sick anywhere from a few days if it's really mild. And some people don't even realize they're sick, right? We know that under 20%, so maybe 18-ish% of people don't have any symptoms, but may or may not be positive. And those are the most dangerous people because they don't know they're sick, and then they go hanging out with people or doing their thing, and they're spreading the virus. So some people have just a couple of days of symptoms and that's it. Now, when people tend to get sick, they're sick for 2 to 3 weeks. Their symptoms usually get worse around day 7 or day 8. And this is something we had talked about on our call before, like, when do you seek help? When do you go to the hospital? When do you go to the doctor? Now, hopefully everybody has their doctor or a doctor that they can get in touch with. If not, go on my website, find the phone number and call me. But the goal is really to keep people out of hospitals. We want to keep people out of the hospital until they absolutely need something that's in the hospital. 1, because we have so few resources, and 2, because there's not a lot of stuff that we know about that can actually help. So we don't want to send you there if there's nothing that we can do for you there. It's sort of just sending you into an area where even more people are infected, and you come out and you're like, well, they didn't do anything. Well, they can only do anything if they have something. So it's sort of helping, like, people like me who are not in the hospitals. What we're doing is spreading information to help our colleagues who are in the hospital so that they don't get overloaded, so that they can take care of the people who are there. So people are usually sick for 2 to 3 weeks. They'll have fatigue, they'll have headaches, they'll have dry cough, they will have a fever. And they don't necessarily have to have all of them. So I know somebody who was a physician who was still seeing patients who had basically just fatigue and headache for a couple of days, nothing else. The younger you are, the less likely you are to have severe symptoms. The more female you are, no, I'm just kidding. Men tend to have worse symptoms than women. I know there's stuff out there about, like, well, women are getting sicker. If women put themselves in situations where they're more likely to be in danger, if women are going out, they're hanging out with other people, they're doing the grocery shopping, they're doing the errands outside, then yes, they're more likely to get infected, but they're not as likely to be sicker. Men are more likely to be sicker. We also know that heart disease makes people sicker, asthma makes people sicker. So for people with those issues, we urge them to stay home even more if that's possible. So those are sort of ways that we figured out, but usually around day 7 or day 8, people start to get worse. And then it takes up to 3 weeks. Like, when people are intubated, they're usually intubated in that 3rd week of illness. So hopefully most people won't see that. We know that it's about 6% of the people who get sick are intubated. So your chances of getting intubated are super low.
What does intubated mean?
When they take a tube and they put that tube down your throat and into your trachea, because that's what's helping you breathe. What's happening with the virus is, thank you for that, Amber. So what they're seeing on X-ray and CT scan is that there's what we call patchy infiltrates. So there's little areas of densities in the lungs. When you take an X-ray of the lung or you take a CT scan of the lung, when you do an X-ray, black is nothing, right? White, when you see an X-ray of a bone, there's white because there's a bone there. It's nice and solid. Black is nothing. It's air. So when you look at the lungs, you mostly see all black because you want to see that. It's mostly air in the lungs. But we're seeing these little patches of white on there, which is if anyone's heard of the cytokine storm, and that's your own body's immune system kind of revving up and going on overdrive and filling up sort of spaces. And when it fills up those spaces, air can't get in those spaces. So people who are sort of, they feel like they're starving for air, those are the people who are more likely to have that tube down their throat. So to the best of our ability, keeping people outside of the hospital, exposing people to UV light, going outside, making sure that you're sleeping enough. My motto always, always, always has been eat enough, sleep enough, drink enough water. Because if you're not doing that, then you're not taking care of yourself. You know, sort of story from way back when, but when I was in my early 20s, I went to India and I worked there for a nonprofit. And there's a lot more stuff in the air there than there is here. We have a lot more public health. We have a lot more like vaccination in terms of a population. And so there's a lot more diseases sort of hanging around in the air. And what I found was that if I didn't eat enough the night before, I would have a fever in the morning. If I didn't sleep enough the night before, I would have a fever in the morning. So, yeah, and that is sort of a proven thing. Your immune system needs fuel, it needs water, and it needs sugar to function. And when you're sleeping, you're conserving those things so that your immune system can work. Often you'll find that people get fevers at nighttime. Your kids, when they're sick, they're fine during the day and they're running around and jumping off of couches. And then when they go to sleep, they spike a fever. That's when their body finally has enough energy to mount that fever. It takes a lot of energy for your body to make a fever. One thing I did want to mention is that if you do get a fever, we are not recommending that anybody take Advil at this time. It's not necessarily dangerous, but we don't have enough information, and we feel that there's enough of a possible risk that we just don't want people taking Advil at all. People will ask, what should you do if you get a fever? Mm-hmm. Typically, my response to that is nothing. The fever is your body trying to kill the virus, right? The fever is your body saying, I'm going to heat myself up enough to keep myself alive, but to kill this virus. So as long as you can tolerate that fever, as long as you are resting and eating and drinking, if you can tolerate that fever, that's your body killing the virus. So you don't need to be stressed about that. You just let it ride. Make sure that you hydrate, because you do get dehydrated when you mount that fever. If you really feel like you can't tolerate the fever, like you're just going to crawl out of your skin, you can't sleep, you can't eat anything, you feel gross, you can take a Tylenol. Tylenol is what we're recommending for any sort of fever reduction during the coronavirus. But again, my general recommendation has always been to not reduce your fever. The only time for me that I say you can do it is when people are diagnosed with the flu, because the flu it dehydrates you so much by you having a fever. Even if you don't have a fever, it's very dehydrating, and it just does it so much that you can go into shock. So that's a way that you can actually reduce your morbidity, we call it, which is bad things happening, and mortality, is reducing the fever during the flu. But for now, for the coronavirus, we have not seen severe fevers. You know, when you get body aches, that's dehydration. So if your body is achy, drink more water.
We've got a question that was posed by Annette. So she says, you know, with conversations that she's having with friends and others, you know, it's like, when this is over, right? So what can that actually mean realistically in terms of our resumption of activities and the other aspects of normal social interaction?
Yeah, and I'm going to go back 1 second to that past conversation. Thanks, Felicia, for that. Advil is ibuprofen, right? Tylenol is acetaminophen. So all of the Advil class, so that's Advil, Aleve, Mobic, like whatever you have, naproxen, all of those are the same class. Don't take any of that, please. And Tylenol or acetaminophen, those are your two things that you can take. It's the same thing. Tylenol is the same as acetaminophen. Tylenol is the brand name and acetaminophen is the generic name. So when this is over, that's a great question. It really all depends on what we do. Like if you look at those graphs, that peak graph where nobody was doing anything, it's all over in 3 months, but lots of people are dead, right? And so when we social distance, we spread it out over more time, but when people go to the hospital, we're hoping that there's beds available for them and ventilators available for them and medicines available for them, so that when you go, you'll have a spot. That's the goal, right? So those graphs are really for what if we only had the ability to social distance or self-quarantine? What if we only had that? The cool thing is that people are scrambling and trying so hard, and necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so people have like done so much stuff in the last 2 weeks, even just me, like learning how to use Instagram and Facebook video and whatever, but like those big players, the labs are creating testing for antibodies. They're trying to figure out what are the drugs that work. They're doing trials. There's so many questions out there about like, does this work? Does that work? Does this other thing work? And people are really trying it out. There is a vaccine or two that are in the works. They're investigating some old vaccines, which according to my dad, who does infectious disease, he's like, this just, that's just really, everybody's like kind of grasping at straws. But there are some new vaccines that are out there. There's some new drugs, not new drugs, some old drugs that we have been trying out and trying to figure out what works. I know that there was lots of media frenzy over Plaquenil, which is hydroxychloroquine, which is a malaria medication, and also azithromycin, which is an antibiotic, right? Doctors are always like, oh my God, why does everybody with a cold just want a Z-Pak? Like a Z-Pak, which is azithromycin, is an antibiotic, right? But you have a cold and that's a virus, and patients swear that it makes you better, and doctors are like, no, it's an antibiotic. What we know is that azithromycin and other medications in its class, like erythromycin, gentamicin, they also have an anti-inflammatory effect. And some of that, so when people get bronchitis, oftentimes we'll write them for a Z-Pak, et cetera, and they say, I immediately felt better. And doctors are like, okay, well, maybe you had something bacterial, but it's really, there's an anti-inflammatory effect happening there as well. The thing with both azithromycin and hydroxychloroquine is that they do something called prolonging the QT interval. So when you get an EKG, there's a bunch of bumps, right? What the heck do those bumps mean, right? There's a P wave, there's a QRS, and there's a T wave. A P wave is your atria beating, the QRS is your ventricles beating, and the T wave is the repolarization. It's literally how the electricity goes when your heart beats. So what it does is it changes the rhythm. Both of those drugs change the rhythm kind of in the same way. So they, instead of your heartbeat being like this, it's slower. So that can cause problems, and that can cause somebody to actually have sudden death. So just taking it to take it is a bad idea. Just taking it without doctor supervision is a bad idea. What are the risks? Doctors can assess that. Typically, in the best of times, we say, we're going to do an EKG first, then we're going to give you those medications, we're going to monitor you and see how it goes. And those are drugs that often are prescribed currently by rheumatologists. Rheumatologists treat autoimmune disease, and what they found is that these drugs do help with a lot of times with autoimmune disease. And what they're saying is that young, healthy people absolutely can take it without too much supervision. And this is helping us in terms of telemedicine. So when you get online with a doctor and they're able to talk to you over here, do they necessarily have to do an EKG? No, they can really assess whether that's safe or not for you, depending on what your risk factors are and your age. Another seemingly, possibly miracle drug that they have tried in the last week or two is called, I can never say it, but tocilizumab, and it's something called an monoclonal antibody. All those drugs that end in MAB at the end, the MAB stands for monoclonal antibody. They're used in a lot of autoimmune disorders and diseases, and so there are rheumatologists who have it in supply, and there have been cases where people are intubated on a vent, super sick, and it's an IV medication, and it's really helped. So all those graphs about social distancing and this is how long it will last, it's going to be changed by what we have available to treat people. Because if we can, right now what we're doing is we're just doing what we call supportive care. We're doing the best that we can do to support people through it. That's what we do for the flu, right? Tamiflu, that drug that we used to write for everybody, right? That helps some, but for people who are in the hospital with the flu, we give Tamiflu at them and we hope, but for the most part, what we're doing is supporting them through it. We're giving them fluids because they're dehydrated. We're making sure their blood pressure stays up. We're intubating them so that they can breathe. So there was a new medication that came out this year, Xofluza, or last year, and supposedly that is better efficacy. But again, the majority of the care that is done in the flu and the majority of what we're doing right now is supportive care. Now, if these drugs come out to actually have efficacy, and if we have enough of them, it's no longer supportive care. That's treatment. We're treating people, and then those numbers are going to go down even faster. So the answer to your question, I don't really know. Right now, what we're looking at is 3-ish months, and we're about 2 to 3 weeks in. And then probably what the prediction is, and a prediction is, just a prediction. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm going to tell you what I think, is that by maybe mid-June, things will be a lot more back to normal, and then we'll see an uptick again in cases of people who never got it in the first place in about September, October, and then by November that will be better again. That's my answer to that.
So, Ruchi, I just, and I'll just share with everyone, I have, my husband tested positive for coronavirus. He's had pneumonia and the virus since March 13th. And I've been home and caring for him and our 2 children. And so I want to just, I'll interject a few times with a few things that we've done here because we've been dealing with this, and ask for your feedback on it. We had a question come in about how long this is airborne and if masks really matter if someone doesn't have symptoms. So that we dealt with that issue. I'm going to just put my son on my lap.
Totally fine.
This is Jackson. So we dealt with that issue because, okay, Mommy, we'll fix it. We dealt with that issue with my husband. He didn't realize that he had to wear a mask when I went downstairs. He was just, I would put the mask on. And he wouldn't. And so can you just talk a bit about how this is airborne? If someone's in the house and they're sick and this is airborne and they cough, do you run away? Do you take cover? Do you tell them to put their mask on because it won't let the particles get in the air? How do you manage that?
Yeah, so what we are finding is that it is airborne and for up to 3 hours. So when you breathe, that stuff is going places, right? So if you have a mask on, it's contained in there. And the cloth mask is really, you're still able to sort of transmit those viral particles through the mask. So I'm actually going to put an image up on my Facebook just about all the different kinds of masks and what, you'll be able to see what kind of particles are blocked, but the cloth masks really block dust particles, they block pollen particles, they block some small amount of bacterial particles, but really not a lot of viral stuff. So if there's a shortage of equipment, which there is, the best place to put the mask is on the sick people because it's going everywhere. It's going on all the surfaces. It's going in the air. It's hanging out in the air. So they walk by and then you walk by and you can breathe it in. And if you have a mask on and you walk by, you still maybe, touch something, you pick it up, it's on your clothing, etc. The biggest risk that we're finding to healthcare workers is not necessarily being just kind of in the same room with patients, but it's when they take off their equipment, right? So it hangs out on those surfaces for a while. So the person who's sick having the mask is really the best case scenario in terms of limiting the amount of virus that goes everywhere. How necessary are masks if one does not have symptoms? I'm going to just go ahead and answer that. It depends. So in the house, they're not. There's no need to have a mask on in the house if you don't have symptoms. But the best, again, place for people who for people to wear a mask is people who are sick. But in a world where we would have unlimited equipment, yep, everybody should wear a mask. Everybody should if you're going outside and you're going to the grocery store and you're breathing in air that other people have breathed in, like I said before, the most dangerous people are the asymptomatic people because they don't know that they're sick, right? And then they're maybe in line in front of you in the grocery store or whatever. So when I do wear a mask when I go out to a store or whatever. And then when I come home and, all the doctors are joking about this, like if you're driving on the street in the middle of the night and you see a naked person on their porch, it's probably just me coming back from a shift, right? Like, what are we doing when we come back in the house? We take off all our clothes, throw them in the washing machine, take a shower, and then hang out with the family. And so I've been making my husband do that when he goes grocery shopping. He leaves the bags out on the back deck, and he just goes, he takes off his clothes, they go in the wash, he goes straight for a shower. And that's what I do when I go out as well. That's what you can do to slow the spread. And it sounds super crazy, but you don't have to think of it as being crazy. It's just, you're just protecting yourself. That's it. Just like when you wash your hands, you're just protecting yourself. It's not crazy. It's just minimizing that spread.
Got it. Feel free, because you're posting questions obviously in the chat, but we want to kind of open it up as a free-flowing conversation. If any of you have specific questions, given what Dr. Kaul has just shared.
Sure. We got one from Louis, who's joined us as well. And I know he's muted right now. I've muted everyone who's joined us, but you can unmute and kind of wave your hand if you have a question, or you can send it to Michelle or myself and we'll ask it, or to the group. So Louis asked that, he said he's concerned about Instacart and other services, but does that bring a whole other level of issues that we need to think about? So I guess he's asking, is it safe to use Instacart and other services right now? And also, while we're on that point, do you have any advice for when you're grocery shopping and bringing your groceries back into the house? I heard leave them in your trunk for 3 hours and because the virus lives on most surfaces for 3 hours, and bring them in after that so that you're not bringing the virus into the house. But will you just kind of address those preventative matters as well?
Absolutely. So there's so many opinions on this, obviously. And if you, I believe it was Trevor Noah did a little thing with Dr. Fauci, who's amazing. And Dr. Fauci was like, don't be crazy, don't wipe it all down. But we are also in a state that's being hit the hardest. I think that's totally reasonable to leave your stuff in the trunk for 3 hours. It's also totally reasonable to leave it on your back deck, especially if there's some sunlight or UV light, right? Because we know that kills the virus. It depends on how it makes you feel, right? So I know somebody who is recently getting over chemo. They're getting delivery only because then they're not going into any place, and they wipe it down. They wipe down every piece of stuff when it comes out of the box and all that stuff. We've been wiping down stuff. It's not that hard to wipe down stuff in terms of boxes or whatever. If it's a sealed box, usually what's in it is fine because nobody's been breathing that air for a while. If you want to wipe down the stuff in there, that's fine. But I don't think it's unreasonable to be wiping stuff. In general, I always, even not in a pandemic, I wash my fresh fruit and vegetables when it comes home because people touch it. Who knows? Some guy scratched his butt and then he picked up an apple and said, no, I don't want this one. And then you pick up that one. I always wash my fruits and vegetables with soap and water. And that's just a normal thing, right? That just kills all the dirt and whatever. I also have pretty bad allergies, so it helps get rid of pesticides on the surface and all that sort of thing. And so that's just sort of a normal thing. But taking that extra step of caution, as long as you're not feeding into this anxiety of I'm going to die, you're not, right? It's if you take it all in the house, your risk, and you don't clean any of it off, your risk is still super low. But if you want that extra layer of reassurance, and most people do, go ahead and wipe it down. It's totally fine.
Ruchi, question. There's, we're bombarded with a lot of information, and it's hard to sift and sort through. Most of it is, pretty accurate and aligned, but are there particular resources that are more credible? Where can we go to really kind of get the most relevant and true information?
And doctors are asking really those same questions, because what's happening is what we're seeing, people have their own judgment about like, I know how this thing works, so this should work or this should not work, or like doctors in the beginning, or everyone in the beginning, but doctors were told not to wear masks in the hospital. And part of that is people from up above trying to balance the whole panic and sickness on an individual level is very different from sickness on a population level, as you guys are seeing, right? And so what you'd want for one person is not necessarily, you wouldn't have the same thing for the whole population. So they really have to figure out what the resources are, what's the spread, all these different things. And so, so resources, as I said, doctors are asking the same thing. Literally what I would say is like, find doctors that see if they're writing stuff out and see what they say. A lot of it is based on in vitro studies right now, because we don't have any in vivo studies, meaning that it's done in a lab or it's done in animals or that sort of a thing. But what happens in reality in humans, we don't know. The CDC and the IDSA, the Infectious Disease Society of America, in my opinion, are a little bit behind. They're a little bit more or less conservative. They're saying it's okay to do XYZ, and then they're slowly kind of getting on board with all this information that we're getting. And again, it's a lot of information to sift through, and they're looking after millions and millions of people, as opposed to us looking after our patients, which is still a lot of people, but it's not millions and millions of people. I've been posting stuff on my Facebook and my business page just about things that I think are useful. I've been sending out email updates, sort of kind of like a newsletter, but really just things that I feel like people should know. And at this time, I would say do the most sort of conservative, meaning the safest thing possible. So if you're going to err on the side of should I wear a mask or should I not wear a mask, wear the mask. Should I wear the gloves or should I not wear the gloves? Wear the gloves. Like, protect yourself. That's my advice. I do want to really quickly hit up as part of my residency, and also I've just done a lot of integrative work, but the Andrew Weil Center has a fellowship in alternative and complementary medicine, and in my residency we did about a third of that fellowship. So they actually put out a statement the other day about what are the things that people can do at home to help themselves. And the number one thing was to sleep enough. And I talked about that towards the beginning, that we know that not getting enough sleep means that your body doesn't have the energy and your immune system doesn't have the energy to fight. So make sure that you're sleeping enough. And then stress management. In reality, not just like, oh, it's really good to meditate because it's nice. No, in reality, stress management, so managing your mind, doing meditation, reduces the cytokines, which are the inflammatory kind of molecules that your body makes, right? And that's what makes you feel like you're kind of constantly in a state of stress. And what we know with this pandemic is that there's something called a cytokine storm. So your body is making all of these sort of factors that are helping your immune system get all revved up, and that is getting to be such a huge cloud that is sort of like, it's filling up those lung spaces where we want the air to go. So stress management actually is shown to decrease the cytokines in your blood. Decrease the number of cytokines, or the amount of cytokines that your body is making. So getting coaching, ways to manage your mind, meditation, even if it's for 5 minutes a day, those things are really helping. And then you guys might want to have a pen and paper ready. Zinc is a supplement that we often use, and in vitro, again, in the test tube or in animals, we have seen that coronaviruses have more trouble getting entry into the cells when you use zinc. So recommended doses are usually about 15 milligrams to 30 milligrams a day. You can order this stuff. CVS, I know, is delivering. There's all sorts of delivery services. You don't need to go out to get things like this. Veggies, fresh veggies. So there's molecules that are found in tomatoes, in nuts, in berries, onions, apples, parsley, celery, and all those things are part of what we call the anti-inflammatory diet. So it brings the inflammation down. And we know that some of those actual molecules are shown to help reduce viral presence and to reduce inflammation. So quercetin is a supplement. It's a bioflavonoid, and there's a lot of bioflavonoids, and they occur in all these vegetables and fruits, and they help to get your inflammation levels down. I know I take quercetin actually for allergies, and it does help my inflammation level. Bioflavonoids are naturally occurring in what we call vine ripened fruits and vegetables, right? So how do we get our stuff at the grocery store? They don't pick it when it's ripe, because if they picked it when it was ripe, by the time it got to the grocery store, it would be rotten. So they pick it when it's not ripe, and then it gets transported, and then it's sort of, you either buy it even a little bit not ripe, or you buy it ripe and you eat it, right? But it doesn't ripen on the vine, so those bioflavonoids don't accumulate in the same way. And so having the fresh fruits and vegetables that I always had as a kid was not enough to really manage my allergies. So I do take a quercetin supplement, and what that's shown is it decreases the inflammation. And the theory is that quercetin and other bioflavonoids may help reduce the kind of overdrive of immune response with this. There's a couple of researchers in Canada who have found that quercetin reduces Ebola viral loads as well as Zika. And they're trying it out. Does it work? They don't know. Is there harm in taking it? No, there isn't. So it's totally fine to do. Licorice, some of the compounds found in licorice, not like Twizzlers, but like actual licorice that you get as a supplement. It usually comes in a very thick black liquid. It almost looks like tar. The only thing to be always careful about with licorice is that if you have high blood pressure, it can make your blood pressure even higher. If you don't have high blood pressure, it's fine. Chinese skullcap is an herb that has been found to have some of these bioflavonoids. So those are things you can do to protect yourself. Vitamin C, anywhere between 500 milligrams and 3 grams, which is 3,000 milligrams a day, can help to strengthen your immune system. We know this, right? And when you're sick, you can take even more than that. So even more than 3,000 milligrams a day is totally fine and safe. Whatever you don't have, you're just going to pee out. It's always better, in my opinion, to have the food than the supplement if it really truly does have that compound in it. Like in quercetin, it's not necessarily there in the non-ripe, vine-ripened fruits and vegetables, but it's stuff at the farmer's market, which we're not having. But those things on a general basis would have quercetin. Vitamin C, you guys know, is in so much stuff, right? All our citrus fruits. So the more that you can have of that, the better. We typically absorb 100% of the vitamins and minerals that are in foods, and somewhere between 5 and 10% of what's in supplements. So that's why they talk about food-based vitamins, because, and even then they're still isolating compounds. It's much better to have the nutrients in the way that nature packaged it, because there's something about the packaging that helps your body absorb it appropriately. And then melatonin. So melatonin is often a sleep aid. We use it for sleep. What we are finding is, again, in vitro, is that it may actually help reduce those cytokines, reduce the inflammation, and reduce people's course of disease. So anywhere between 1 and 5 milligrams of melatonin, you can even find 10 in the stores, will be appropriate. And if you can get your hands on that, if you're having symptoms, you definitely can take that. There's 2 things that I want to specifically mention, and that's elderberry and vitamin D. And what we know about those is that the elderberry and the vitamin D have been shown to possibly help in prevention. But once you have an infection, they're actually advising against it, advising caution with using those things because they can increase the cytokine storm. So I know that that's true with elderberry. So if you don't have symptoms and you're not sick, have at it, take it. But if you are to develop symptoms, please stop taking it because it can make your course worse. In the case of vitamin D, what my belief is that, so a couple of decades ago when I was in training, there was a study that came out that vitamin D, lower levels of vitamin D are associated with like every disease in the book, right? Heart disease, diabetes, depression, you name it, it's there. And so everybody got tested for vitamin D, and then everybody got put on vitamin D. And so labs made money and supplement companies made money. And then the pharmaceutical companies were like, hey, we want in on that. And they made pharmaceutical grade versions of that. And so a couple of years ago, they did a repeat study because everybody probably that and I know and everybody else was taking vitamin D. So they said, well, we should have enough subjects to know whether this vitamin D supplementation that we've been doing is actually helpful. And what they found was no difference at all. And so the thought really is that what they saw in that original study, vitamin D goes up when you're outside and you're outside in the sunlight. Right? So it was probably the people who were outside and they were more active and they had more healthy habits. And now we know even with Corona, right? It's the UV light that is helping to kill the virus. So is the vitamin D just a confounder? Possibly. So vitamin D and elderberry are both not recommended while you're sick at this time. So don't take those when you're sick. So the things that you can take and there's no harm in taking are garlic, vitamin A, vitamin C, zinc, peppermint, a Chinese herb called astragalus. All these things, again, we don't have evidence that they do work, but we know that those are not harmful. So if you want to do those, you can. The quercetin, the licorice, the Chinese skullcap, just making sure with the licorice that you don't have high blood pressure. So I just wanted to make sure to get that information out there so that when people feel like they can't do anything, that there's something that they can do. And then around week 2 to 3, when people are getting short of breath, so as soon as you have symptoms, I want you to call your doctor. Call your doctor and say, these are my symptoms, and let them know so that they can keep an eye on what is going on. And then, right now what we're trying to do is keep people out of hospitals. And so if they're able to order home oxygen for you, if your insurance company can deliver that to you, and even if you need oxygen, you can do that in the home. That's safer as long as somebody is checking in on you regularly, right? And that's what I love most about my practice is that pretty much in the course of a week, I can touch base with all of my patients. And this last few weeks I have been just to be like, are you okay? What's going on? And some patients are doing totally fine and some people are not. And so some people need more check-ins more often. And a lot of times our healthcare system is overloaded at baseline, and this is sort of overdrive. So I want to make sure that you guys all have somebody that you can reach out to. You're welcome to go to my website and call with my number. I will get back to you.
Thank you, Ruchi. I've actually put your phone number, not your phone number, I'm sorry, your website and your Facebook in the chat. It's the number 3wellness.com for those of you guys that don't see the chat. So feel free to go to her website. I'm going to make a quick comment, and then we have a hand raised from Portia, and then we're going to close out in a few minutes because just out of respect for time, it's almost 1:30. So one of the things that I did, so I'm asymptomatic. I have coronavirus too, likely because I've lost my sense of taste and smell, which is one of the symptoms that we are finding is happening with people who are asymptomatic. So I'm protecting myself from with the kids. And one of the things that I found was very helpful that a nurse told me to do was to gargle. As soon as I started to feel like I had a sore throat, to go ahead and gargle with a mix of Listerine and peroxide and water so that the virus goes into our stomach where it can be killed instead of into the lungs where it spreads. So if you can just let us know if that's something that you would approve of as well, if people are having that symptom of the sore throat. And then Portia, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and you can ask your question when Ruchi finishes addressing this question. Or I'm sorry, Dr. Kaul finishes addressing.
Okay, it's fine. Of course. So Listerine, there's alcohol in it, right? And I don't know really that it's strong enough to kill all the stuff that's in there, but all the stuff out there about like if you drink water then it'll go into your stomach and not your lungs. Like, no, once it's in you, that virus is replicating in your blood, so it's gonna go everywhere. And if it's hanging out in your throat, you're not going to be pushing it into your stomach. Does it hurt to gargle with Listerine and peroxide? No, it does not. So if you want to do it, totally have a great time and knock yourself out. But don't knock yourself out, but you know what I mean. But we do know that women are protected. The estrogen that we have, so especially premenopausal women, are protected. Estrogen somehow is helping us, and I think that's really more related to the heart disease and how the coronavirus can affect the people with the heart disease. So people who have heart disease are at greater risk. I just want to address a couple things in here, and I'm going to write the spelling to quercetin so that you guys see what it is. But liquid chlorophyll, please know, liquid chlorophyll, yes, not chloroquine, right? Liquid chloroquine, which is like the stuff in the aquarium stuff that people are overdosing on because someone said that you should take that. Don't do that. Chlorophyll is totally fine. What dosage of quercetin? Probably about 500 milligrams twice a day. The thing is with the quercetin, like you could take more and it's not going to be dangerous. So it's okay. Don't have the whole bottle. Lemons are not alkalizing and key limes are not alkalizing. Alkaline is base, and acid is acid, right? And so we know that citrus fruits are acidic. It doesn't matter though, because once everything goes in your stomach, that acid is way stronger than anything else, and it neutralizes all those other things. So that alkalinizing and acidifying things don't really help you in terms of this. And liquid chlorophyll, PCR. The test is a qualitative PCR, only moderately useless. It's not useless. It's actually helpful. The PCR is actually the one that's most helpful. What the test that we had in this country in the beginning was not helpful, and there were a lot of false negatives, and there's a whole lot of other discussion around that. But what you do want to ask for a PCR test if you have it. Yoga too, yes, yoga too, absolutely. Yoga is the best thing. Yoga in the sunlight in your front yard would be the best.
Right. I'm sorry. I was gonna just quickly ask, what about apple cider vinegar? I've been hearing and reading a lot that apple cider vinegar can be like a natural way to boost your immune system and fight off any bacteria. What are your thoughts?
So it doesn't really do that. What we do know in terms of studies is that it does something called delays your gastric emptying. So it slows down your stomach. So typically we eat something and in 4 hours, right? Do you remember that number from school? Once you eat something in 4 hours, you empty out your stomach. So now you can stand on your head, whatever. You can stand on your head right after you eat because you have a sphincter. But apple cider vinegar delays that gastric emptying. So people have used it successfully for weight loss, right? Because you're putting food in your mouth and then the food sits in your stomach and you're full for longer. So it can delay gastric emptying up to 8 hours. So instead of food sitting in there for 4 hours, it's sitting there for 8 hours. And so you don't eat as much. But again, even though it's vinegar and it's acidic, it's a light acid. It's a weak acid, what we call, right? And so when you put it when you swallow it, it goes into your stomach and there's a strong acid in there. The pH in your stomach is 4, right? The pH in the majority of your body is 7, and probably the pH of the vinegar that you see around is like 5.5, 6. So whatever's in your stomach is gonna kill that acid. It doesn't matter if you eat acidic foods or alkaline foods or whatever. Your stomach is gonna eradicate all that jazz. That's the cool thing about the human body, is that you can trash it, right? You can treat it so badly and it just fixes itself and fixes itself and fixes itself to the best of its ability. So a lot of times the things we want to put in our mouth are the things that help the body to support itself. So decreasing the inflammation with fresh fruits, fresh vegetables, getting outside, getting the exercise, doing the meditation, because that is all stuff that enables your own body to kind of reduce this response.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So helpful, Dr. Ruchi. Thank you so much for giving us great information. Yeah, I mean, we really want to prevent people from getting sick. But I just want to say, with my husband getting sick, he really went through it and it was really tough for a while, but he overcame and he's beating it and he's coming back to good health. And so, just to take away some of the fear that you may have, this isn't a death sentence. They're things that we can do to prevent people getting the coronavirus. And I hope that you've gotten a lot of great resources from today's call. If you do get it, please don't panic and recognize that you do need to call your doctor immediately, or go on my3wellness.com and reach out to Dr. Ruchi immediately. And the hospital might not be the safest place for you to be because there's a lot of sick people there. So there are things that you can do at home, but you have to be proactive. This is not something to get and just ignore it and keep working and not sleeping. All the tips and the nutrients and supplements that Dr. Ruchi shared with us, you definitely please go out and get them. So Dr.
Delivered.
What'd you say?
Have them delivered.
Have them delivered. Yes, sorry, have them delivered. So Michelle and I just want to thank you so much for joining us today. And we are going to send a post email out, and we'll include the link to watch this or to share this video with friends and loved ones if they would like to watch this. And we'll also, Dr. Ruchi, with your permission, if you can give us a list of some of the things that you said, if people didn't catch them all, we'll include those in the email as well. Yeah. Next week, we're going to be back on. Michelle and I are doing this weekly. Next week, we'll be back on talking about leadership during crisis. And so if you're a professional, if you're a leader, if you're leading a team and you're trying to figure out how to effectively do so, you definitely don't want to miss that. You can register on the same link that you used to register for this week's webinar. You can register for next week's. In the following week, we'll be doing financial security during uncertain times. We have a lot of good things coming up. We're here on Wednesdays at 12:30 for the next couple of months. This is where you find us. You can come meet some new people, learn some new things, and just keep yourself sane during these challenging times. Mostly
I just
everyone.
want to add one thing.
Me too.
If there's additional topics that you guys want to hear from, we're going to be using you guys as sort of a focus group. So, we've come up with some subsequent topics, but we are open and receptive to what you all may find relevant, so we can make sure that, we're keeping you guys informed.
And just a reminder that 80% of people have mild to no symptoms, right? And 15% of people have severe symptoms, but they get better. And it's really only the 6% of people who get intubated and 1% of people who die. So, and those people, again, we know are at risk in a lot of other ways, whether it's from the amount of exposure they had or from their own stuff. So like Amber said, don't think that this is a death sentence. Most people get through it and they get through it just fine, but just, again, controlling the spread and staying home and doing the best you can to rest and take care of yourself and drink lots of water.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So again, guys, you can find Dr. Ruchi. Her website is my3wellness.com. You can find Michelle at intoactioncoaching.com. That's you. Yes, INTU actioncoaching.com. And you can find me at quartzwellnesscollective.com. That's QUARTZ wellnesscollective.com. If you're here, you're getting our emails. So we welcome you to continue to join us. And just a quick plug, I have a webinar on Friday. If anyone is looking for coping skills on building resilience during these challenging times, you can go to my website and sign up, register for the summit that I'm doing on Friday at 12:30. And you'll also get 4 videos on things like decluttering your house, establishing your new normal, and fighting these negative thoughts that may be popping into your head right now. So lots of good tips and resources from us. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. And we hope to see you next week and in the following weeks.
Stay safe and serene.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Goodbye.
Bye, all.